All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video as Tim Kawakami has a very interesting article on who the Niners' next defensive coordinator could be in the SF Standard. We'll talk a little bit about that article coming up next. Of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket chili. Tell them that Krug sent you. And this video is also sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get your first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does is automatically entered to win a free signed Ricky Pearsall jersey. We'll announce the winner on Super Bowl Sunday. All right, let's talk a little bit about what I think is a really, really interesting piece from Tim Kawakami, who writes for the San Francisco Standard. And, basically the 49ers have reportedly, according to Tim, they have reportedly discussed the idea of hiring Pete Carroll as a potential defensive coordinator option. This is according to Tim Kawakami's latest piece in the SF Standard. And, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. The 49ers at this point, I think all of us believe that their first choice, and maybe their only choice, is Robert Saleh to be their defensive coordinator. And there was a lot of talk 24 hours ago that the Jacksonville Jaguars would go with Liam Cohen, the Tampa Bay offensive coordinator, as their new head coach because they want to support Trevor Lawrence. And yet Liam Cohen pulled his name out of the running and re-signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with an additional raise, I'm sure, to continue to be their offensive coordinator. So a lot of the thinking is that Robert Saleh may now be the front runner for the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching job. Interestingly enough, the Jaguars this morning fired Trent Baalke as their head coach. So Shad Khan has gotten rid of Baalke, and according to Ian Rappaport, a number of candidates have expressed, hesitancy to sign up to go work in Jacksonville because of the presence of Trent Baalke. So now Baalke's out, and I got to think that Robert Saleh is probably at or near the top of the list for the Jacksonville Jaguars as far as their head coaching options to replace Doug Peterson. So the Niners may get left with no first choice, with Robert Saleh potentially becoming the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, what about Jeff Ulbrich? But no, he took the Raheem Morris's offer to join the Atlanta Falcons. What about Lou Anarumo? No. He's no longer the Bengals defensive coordinator, but he's going to Indianapolis. What about Dennis Allen? No. He's going with Ben Johnson to the Chicago Bears. So as you can see here, a number of the top candidates are coming off the board. And Kyle Shanahan said that he was open-minded to switching schemes, but I think the 49ers really like their scheme. I think the 49ers really like the 4-3. I think they like the wide 9. And you know what? It's Pete Carroll's defense. So, Pete Carroll is out there. I don't know that he would be willing to be Kyle Shanahan's defensive coordinator, but I think you got to check in with him. And that's what Tim Kawakami is saying in his piece today in the SF Standard. Why not just check in with Pete Carroll? Now, there's a chance that Pete will be hired as the head coach of the Raiders. So it's not, for sure that the Raiders, he doesn't become a head coach. And who knows, maybe Pete only wants to be a head coach and would never even consider being a defensive coordinator. But what if the Raiders don't? What if the Raiders, who just brought in a new personnel czar, what if they decide to go in a different direction and don't want to hire Pete Carroll? Just the fact that Pete Carroll is talking to the Raiders, I agree with Tim. It's a strong indicator that he's interested in getting back in the NFL in some way. And why wouldn't he? Pete Carroll's a lifer. We know Kyle Shanahan has great respect for Pete Carroll. I would imagine Pete Carroll has some respect for Kyle Shanahan as well. As Tim points out in the piece, Carroll is one of the original architects of of the Seattle defense, the Seattle style defense, which is a 4-3 front, a cover three, cover three heavy back end, and that's what Kyle Shanahan has chosen as the Niners defensive scheme because he felt it was really difficult as an offensive play caller to go up against the 4-3 cover three with the wide nine, front. And according to Tim, and this is the quote from Tim in this article, I've heard that Pete Carroll's name has come up inside the 49er headquarters as an interesting idea at least. But the 49ers also have to wait things out with Carroll, who, according to The Athletic, could be the Raiders' number one choice. Now that Ben Johnson has said, no, I'm not going to take your money. I'm going to Chicago instead. A lot of people are now saying that maybe Pete Carroll is the number one choice of the Raiders, and he may go there as their head coach. So this all may be for naught. But it is interesting. And the Niners do have to have a plan because what if Robert Saleh takes the Jacksonville job? What if, Ulbricht's gone? And other than Robert Saleh, the 49ers have officially interviewed very few people. They interviewed Brandon Staley, and they also interviewed who's under contract right now with the 49ers. And he had an impact this year working with the cornerbacks. And you heard Demo Lenore, say that he thinks that Brandon Staley's the Kyle Shanahan of defense and feels like he has all the answers. But the Niners also interviewed Detroit Lions defensive backfield coach Deshae Townsend, Detroit's defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn today became the head coach of the New York Jets. There's a lot of talk that Steve Wilks will wind up being Aaron Glenn's defensive coordinator there in Jets land there in New Jersey. And there's a chance that Deshae Townsend either wants to stay with the Lions. He's got Brian Branch back there and a bunch of young, really talented players. Or maybe he jumps with Aaron Glenn. Or maybe the Niners ultimately named Deshae Townsend their defensive coordinator. But it's interesting because in reading this SF Standard piece, I thought the most interesting themes that came out is that Tim is reporting that energy is a key word in this 49er defensive coordinator search. And the implication is that Steve Wilks didn't have enough energy in 2023 and that Nick Sorensen didn't have enough energy in 2024. And that guys like the guys that came before him, Robert Saleh and D'Amico Ryans, were high energy guys. Saleh was Shanahan's first defensive coordinator from 2017 through 2020 and then took the top spot with the Jets. And there's no question the Niners love the on-field energy of Robert Saleh. They loved the on-field energy of a D'Amico Ryans. But I mean, if you're thinking highly energized coaches, is there anybody who's more highly energized than Pete Carroll ever in the history of football on the sidelines, college or pro? I mean, this guy's now in almost his mid-70s. He's 73. And as Tim says, and I totally agree, he's still probably the most energetic candidate the 49ers could possibly consider. It would be an amazing story. And we all love an amazing story. But Pete Carroll was the 49ers defensive coordinator from 1995 to 1996. And this is when George Seifert was the head coach. He just wound up missing Mike Shanahan's 49ers offensive coordinator tenure by 1 year. So it wasn't like Mike Shanahan was the OC when Pete was the DC. Mike came a year after. But the Niners cycled through a lot of great coaches on both sides of the ball and through much of their 80s and 90s run. You're not on top of the football world just because you got good players. You got to have good players. You got to have good coaches. You got to have good executives. You got to have the whole thing, percolating at a pretty high rate. And the Niners had that. In the mid 90s, 95 and 96, Pete Carroll was the Niners defensive coordinator. So it is interesting. And you say, well, come on, Pete Carroll's a head coach. Kyle Shanahan's not going to offer the defensive coordinator job and insult a head coach, right? Well, Tim points out that he offered the defensive coordinator job to Bill Belichick last year, and Belichick turned it down. And the additional point, according to Tim, is that if Belichick had not taken the UNC job, that Shanahan might have offered him the defensive coordinator job again this month. So I think it's really an interesting idea, Pete Carroll. He had an incredible run at SC, turned SC into just the premier college football program. Then he went to Seattle. He had a 14-year run in Seattle, and it was an incredible run. And Pete and Russell Wilson during much of that run kind of owned the 49ers. And it's funny because, Tim Kawakami in this piece says here's what Shanahan told me in January of 2024, so just a couple months ago, about going up against Pete Carroll. And this is a quote from Shanahan. He says, their team played at another level than most guys. And when you talk about how they compete and all that stuff and all those words that he uses, which is great, but what really is great is the film that he had. And I really caught it right away in my first year as a head coach, just how physical they were on offense, defense, special teams, regardless of what you were playing with schematically. Really what it came down to is how much you got after it, how physical guys were. That's what I always felt like. Us in Seattle played a little differently. So that was Shanahan. He says, I think that always started with Pete. So if Shanahan really believes that the intensity that Seattle played with was really unique and that Carroll was the guy who drove that intensity, then why wouldn't you talk to him? And there's a chance, and Tim points this out, there's a chance that, a defensive coordinator job is just too much of a step back for Pete Carroll at this point. That's possible. It's possible. But you know what? The NFL is filled with great coaches that kind of took lesser roles in their twilight years. Not everybody is the main guy till the end. Some guys, take lesser roles or front office roles, and still are involved, but aren't necessarily the guy. And who knows? Maybe Pete is only wanting a head coaching opportunity, and he would never consider a defensive coordinator job. Maybe the Niners, who have had, this year Sorensen, last year Wilkes, the year before that it was D'Amico, before that it was Robert Saleh. They've had a lot of turnover at defensive coordinator. Maybe the Niners don't want that anymore. Maybe they don't want somebody who's only going to be on the job for a year or 2 or 3. Maybe they're looking for somebody long term, which I don't know if that would jive with their pursuit of Robert Saleh, because the odds are is that Robert Saleh probably either this head coaching cycle or in the next 1 or 2, he's going to get a job. He's going to get a job. He's a top candidate. He's probably going to get a job in one of the next 2 or 3 coaching cycles to be a head coach. So if you're going with Robert Saleh, you kind of are thinking short term anyway. So to me, going with Pete Carroll makes perfect sense. But you never know. Maybe Shanahan and Lynch, because of all the turnover, want more continuity in their defensive coordinator position. The only way to guarantee that is to go with somebody who's either not qualified really, really young, or somebody who, is for whatever reason not going to be named a head coach anytime soon. But man, if you're looking, and as Tim points out, if you're looking for somebody to run the Pete Carroll system, it's silly to not ask if Pete Carroll himself, wants the job. And it's interesting. Tim says this is what Shanahan said earlier this month when asked if he'd like the new defensive coordinator to run the same Seattle-style system and scheme that the Niners have always run under Shanahan here in San Francisco. And here's what Shanahan said to that. He said, I love the scheme that we've had here. I think it's one of the hardest things to go to when you've got the right guys in the right spots, but I do think people adjust to schemes, and I think you have to adjust too, depending on your personnel. And I think that was tougher. That was a tougher thing for us this year. I'm not saying that you've got to change schemes, but you have to have the ability, the history, and the knowledge of how to change some stuff up when you're in certain situations. And I think that we need to do that more going forward. I think, now, this is just my interpretation of this quote. My interpretation of this quote is that Shanahan kind of liked Sorensen, but when the Niners weren't getting home with their front 4, and they had 0 sacks in, I think, 4 of the last 6 games, when you're not getting home, you have to be able to dial up some creative blitzes. You have to be able to, create pressure, simulate pressure. You have to be able to throw different wrinkles. And I think, that's what he's referencing. He's like, he's like not saying that you got to change schemes because he likes the scheme. But you have to be able to adjust on the fly. He says, and as he says here, you have to have the ability, the history, and the knowledge of how to change some stuff up. And a first-year coordinator like Nick Sorensen probably didn't have the confidence or the experience or the knowledge base to make those adjustments, to dial up creative blitz schemes in the midst of the front four not getting home. And he didn't have that level of creativity. But a guy like Carroll, who's 73, who's been in this, basically this is his system, he probably will be able to dial up some creative blitzes. He probably will be able to dial up some simulated pressure and try to create a different feel for the offense when they're not getting it done with their front four. And I think that's what Kyle was saying. I don't think it's Kyle saying, hey, man, I want to scrap the wide 9. I don't like the 4-3. Let's go to the 3-4. I don't think that's what he's saying there. I think, the fact that he wants Robert Saleh and that Saleh's their first choice is almost a dead giveaway that they like their scheme. And why is Saleh such a fit? Because he knows Chris Kasarik. And, I don't think the Niners want to change up the wide 9. I don't think they want to dump Kasarik. I think they like Kasarik, and they want to keep Kasarik. I think they like the wide 9. They want to keep the wide 9. I think they like their 4-3. I think they want to keep their 4-3. I don't get the sense that they want to make a dramatic change to a 3-4 because they've got guys like Bosa. You're going to Bosa in a 2-point stance. He's suddenly Nick Bosa, who's one of the best defensive ends in football, is going to have to rush standing up when he's not used to it. So I think even though Shanahan said at the presser, hey, we're open to anything, and if we need to change, we'll change. And I think that's just something you say when you win 6 games and you don't go to the playoffs and you fell woefully short of expectations. You don't discount anything, especially at the point where he spoke to us, which is literally 72 hours after the conclusion of the season. You're not going to be like, oh, nope, we're going to do this or that. You're going to keep your options open. You're going to talk to as many people as possible. At the point he talked to us, he's still doing an autopsy on the season and what happened and where they fell short, how they fell short. All that, the hay was not in the barn yet. The work was not all done on the autopsy when he sat down with us in the media and kind of mapped out the off season. So when he said, yeah, we're open to switching schemes, I think you have to be open to everything. But I think if you really pushed it further, as Kyle just said there that I just quoted, he loves the scheme. He loves their defensive scheme. It is his hand-picked defensive scheme. So, to the idea of going to Pete Carroll, it sounds really dramatic. And who knows? Maybe Pete wouldn't be up to it. Pete has coached 18 years in the NFL as a head coach. He's got 291 career games coached. He's 170 wins, 120 losses, 137-89-1 with Seattle, 27-21 in 3 years in New England, and 6-10 in his 1 year with the New York Jets. So, Pete's had a ton of success. It would be an incredible story if he was born in San Francisco. I mean, this guy went to Redwood. That's right. He's a Marin guy. He went to UOP. His first job in coaching was 1973 at UOP in Stockton. 1973 to 1976, GA for UOP. Then he went to Arkansas, Iowa State, Ohio State, did the college thing, NC State, back to UOP in 1983 as the defensive coordinator. And then he jumped to Marv Levy's Bills. The Bills in 84. He was there. He was with the Vikings as the defensive backfield coach, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89. Jets defensive coordinator in 90 through 93. Jets head coach in 94. And then the Niners got him off of his head coaching gig, his failed 6-10 year. He jumped back to the Niners. Smart move because the Niners were stacked in the 90s. And Pete was the defensive coordinator for the Niners, 95, 96. then became the Patriots head coach in 97, 98, 99, jumped to USC in 2001, and had a great run there, 2001 through 2009. He was an amazing coach at USC. And then went to Seattle, 2010. Him and John Schneider. He brought in John Schneider. The two of them worked seamlessly. And, the resume is impressive. I mean, the guy's won a Super Bowl. He's won a national championship. He's won 4 Rose Bowls. He's a 7-time Pac-12 champion. He was the coach of the year in the college game. 500 in the postseason, 11-11. How about his college football coaching record? 97 wins and 19 losses. He won 84% of his college football games. As an NFL head coach, he's 181, 131, and 1. It's pretty damn good. 580 win percentage in his career in the NFL. So I think it would be really cool. I mean, one, because Pete's Pete, and he, in a lot of ways, he's exactly what the Niners are looking for. Are they looking for wisdom? Yes. Are they looking to the future? Or are they trying to get it done right now? They're trying to get it done right now. To me, Pete Carroll would send the exact right message. We want smart, capable people. We want a high-energy leader. And we want a guy, we want to win now. We're not thinking about 25 years from now. I mean, when I look at Kansas City, I kind of think, they've got a loud message from their coaches to their players. And the loud message is Reed is old. Spags is old. Dave Taub is old. These are older coaches. I would be willing to guess that the trio of Spags and Reed and Dave Taub are probably the oldest trio of coaches leading any team in the NFL. So they're all about right now. And I'll say this, from working in the NFL, working in the Canadian League, there was a time when I was a 25-year-old coach, 25-year-old scout, 24-year-old scout, where every other guy in the room was in their 70s. And I'll tell you what I learned is that old people know everything and young people know nothing. We young people have enthusiasm and energy and good intentions. Old people have the answers through living, through life experience and success and failure, and just trial and error. And I was that young coach, young scout saying, man, I got all the answers. And in reality, I didn't have any of the answers. And the old guys in the room had all the answers. The old scouts were the better scouts. The old coaches were the better coaches. The younger coaches may have been more energetic. They may have had an idea here or there. They may have advanced things. But generally, the older people have the wisdom. And I know there's probably younger people going, come on, blah, blah, that's this generation, boomers, and all these rips that people like to have. But it's really true. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. You need experience in life to be good at anything. And are you good at what you do today? Yeah, but guess what? If you do it every day for the next 20 years, you're going to be better at it in 20 years. So I've always had a great respect for older people and people that have experience and wisdom. And the one thing about Pete Carroll, I think why he's perfect for this job, and it's a great article by Tim Kawakami, is because he's both. Pete is the high energy leader with all the answers. You got to respect him day one because it's his defense. In a lot of ways, he's the architect of it. But he's also still very high energy, very, very passionate, very, very driven. And this would be so cool. As a guy who was born in 1951 in San Francisco, to have the kind of Hall of Fame coaching career he's had, and to go from Redwood High School to, College of Marin to UOP to a UOP grad assistant to coaching the Niners in the 90s as an assistant, and then going against them in the 2000s and 2010 through 23 with Seattle, and then potentially to finish up as a 49er defensive coordinator and see them, help lead them to their 6th Lombardi. I think it would be an awesome story. And I think Pete is the guy. He's exactly the right guy. He's the right guy because he's high energy. He's the right guy because he's wise. He's the right guy because he's passionate. And he's the right guy because he's experienced. And the other thing is, this, I don't know that Pete's going anywhere. I don't know that he's going to get another head coaching opportunity. This is probably would be his last run. And what an incredible place to finish with an organization that he once called home. I think it's a great idea. All right, great piece by Tim Kawakami. If you want to hear more from Tim about this piece, join me tonight at 6 p.m. on Niners Nightly, because at 6:15, Tim's going to stop by and we're going to talk about this article on KMBR. So tonight at 6 o'clock, Niners Nightly, Tim Kawakami will join me. We'll talk more about Pete Carroll and the possibility of him being a candidate for the Niners defensive coordinator position. It's a great piece by Tim. I would encourage all of you guys to go to the San Francisco Standard and sign up. Support guys like Tim and Dave Lombardi, two of the better Niner writers, in my opinion, in this market, and they're both there at the San Francisco Standard. So check out Tim tonight on KMBR with me in the 6 o'clock hour. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Better for sponsoring this video, and thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.